Welcome back to Guides.Global and to our discussion about buying property in Bulgaria. As you know, my name is John Howell and I'm the Editorial Director of Guides.Global, and with me today I have Lyubov Jones, and Lyubov is a lawyer practicing both in the UK and Bulgaria and experienced in dealing with such transactions. More importantly, perhaps from our point of view, she's also the author of our guide to buying property in Bulgaria. Lyubov, welcome back. In this section, I just want to deal very briefly with the question of what are the big dangers? What are the things that go wrong on a regular basis when people are buying property in Bulgaria, and therefore what should they be guarding against?
The first of all, I think we need to mention a preliminary contract if it has been concluded with some bad clauses that are in favor on only one side, say the developer, who is the seller, then you may end up in the dangerous situation when you can't have a winning situation. The contract will be just,
yes,
you know,
a bad contract.
Bad contract.
And your lawyer should advise you whether you've got a bad contract.
Yes, that's the task of the lawyer,
yes,
to make sure that the contract defends your interest properly, and especially the preliminary contract, because it's the most important contract in the process of buying property.
Okay, and another one?
Another danger, if you have not checked the property when you sign the preliminary contract, it's again dangerous, because you can end up with the property that has been mortgaged already. And
of course, if you do that, you take over the mortgage. If you go ahead and buy that property, you get a free gift of the mortgage with it.
Yes, correct. There is no restrictions that the developer could use a mortgage to build this property, but the most important that at the end, or when the property should be transferred into your name, it should be clear
yes,
out, you know, any restrictions and charges
yes,
on the property. That's dangerous. They're also very dangerous if the developer significantly delays with the construction of the property, and then your preliminary contract is expired. Then you will.
So how long does a preliminary contract remain valid for?
Yes, it's 5 years from the date of the contract when the property should be completed. You should count from this date.
So in other words, if you sign a contract now in November 2015 and the project is due to be completed in December 2016, if it isn't completed 5 years after that, the contract will expire.
Yes, if it hasn't, yes,
yes,
correct. If any delay within this 5 years period, you have the right to sue the developer, to challenge this contract. After that, it's very disputable. You may still will have the right to challenge it, but it's more complicated.
And of course, lots of developments were very badly delayed during the recession of the mid-2000s. So something to be well aware of.
Yes, that's my very strong advice to all the buyers who are buying property. Be careful about the time limit that's set in the contract. Remember that this is not the target or task of the lawyer to check the time limit. He wouldn't give you legal advice if you don't ask about it. Because you should be aware that your contract...
In other words, because this is a question of operated by law, the lawyer will assume that you know that after 5 years you lose your rights, and so may not tell you about it unless you ask.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Very often happen that the client asks for limited service, for limited legal advice, and of course the lawyer can't predict that there will be a situation in which your contract will expire.
And he will just assume that you knew that that was the case, because everybody knows that, because that's the way it is in Bulgaria.
Correct.
So if you're But if you're dealing with a lawyer who specializes in foreign clients, then maybe they will be a little more attuned to those things and tell you the stuff that you
Yes.
probably don't know but ought.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other big dangers?
Yes, if the property price that you bought is the property under the preliminary contract is not the same that state in the final
Yes.
deed.
So in other words, you've agreed to pay 50,000 euros, and in the title deed it only says 20,000 euros.
Yes, yes, and sometimes it could be danger for you, because if something goes wrong with the project, with the property, destroyed, burnt after being transferred to you, then you can claim only this amount of money from the seller that's been shown in
Yes.
the title deed.
And of course, this was very, very, very common in Bulgaria, because if they declared a lower price, they had to pay less tax on their capital gain. And they would try and persuade you to declare a lower price because you would pay a little bit less property transfer tax. But it is never a good idea.
Never a good idea, because you never know if you go in to sell the property, what price you will take for this property and what consequences you would take after being, doing anti-declaration when you bought this property.
And unless you can find someone who's prepared to make an under-declaration when you sell it,
yes,
you will have made a completely artificial capital gain of 30, 40, 50,000 euros on which you will pay tax.
Yes, it's it's a bit your personal. There are a bit, certain different circumstances could be involved,
Yes.
but you should be very careful what you want to declare as the property price and whether you will take.
Add to all those disadvantages the fact it's illegal in most countries. So, this is not a thing to do.
It's illegal in Bulgaria as well, but because it's not a criminal affair, it's just a breach of civil law, then people try to,
Yes.
avoid the
Okay.
responsibility.
Very good point. Don't do it.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else that you think is particularly important to draw people's attention to?
When you go in person to buy property, I'm speaking out of my practice that recently I had a case like this. The seller was absolutely, the buyer, was absolutely sure that he is buying free of charge property, because the agreement between him and the developer was that the mortgage will be released. But it's actually staying in a title. And interesting enough, because he attended there in person and he had a translator, interpreter, who obviously translated the title deed to him. And why didn't they pay attention on this? Either just missed out or what happened. Therefore, always being careful when you're buying property. If you go there in person, be sure that you understand.
Well, be sure to take your lawyer as well.
Yes,
yes.
Take your lawyer. If you take an interpreter, be sure that you understood everything what he translated to you.
Okay. Can I just raise one other point? And that is, what happens if the developer goes bust? Let's say you have agreed to buy property that is still in the course of construction and the developer goes bust before delivering it.
Yes, that's in list of dangerous situation for the buyer as well, because in such case you lost your money.
Yes, there's no guarantee. It's not like in some countries where the money you've paid is guaranteed. You have lost your money.
Yes.
So perhaps the sensible thing here to do is to buy property that's already constructed, where you can walk in and turn on the tap and water comes out.
Good point, because based upon recent experience and all these disadvantages of buying off-plan properties, now I think foreigners came to the conclusion that it's much better to buy ready-made property that you see that has been constructed. You can check it, you can touch it. You know that it exists, and you only need to be careful about other things and not about that the developer will get bust.
Well, finally in this discussion, and very briefly, I just want to talk about some of the other things that the buyer ought to do when they buy a property. Okay, they've done all the due diligence, they've bought their property, they've signed the title, they've paid their taxes, but probably there are other things they might want to think about as well, such as, for example, making wills, maybe getting some ongoing tax advice. Maybe they want to rent out the property and they need to talk about contracts for rentals and appointing agents to rent the property and so on. There's an awful lot of stuff, isn't there, which flows out of your decision to go and put down some roots in another country.
Yes, correct. The time is passing by, and the first buyers that went years ago to Bulgaria now already experienced some of such situations that you pointed out just now. And yeah, you need always to have in mind some good lawyer, that good for you, Bulgarian lawyer, that can be asked for certain advice.
Do you find that you and other Bulgarian lawyers are proactive about that? Do you say to people, now you bought this house, and I don't want to sound as though I'm creating work for myself, but you really ought to think about doing A, B, C, D, and E? Or do the lawyers say, well, that's that job finished, and I'll now go on to the next client and ignore these other issues?
Yes, in general terms, to be honest with you, it's the lawyer, when he finished this service, he goes to another client without thinking that he could provide with further legal advice on...
And of course make some more money.
To make,
Yes.
more money.
Yes.
Therefore, it just, I think, left somehow behind of the legal lawyer's mind.
Lyubov, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating discussion, and I hope our readers have also found it of interest. So just to remind you, we have our Guides.Global guide to buying property in Bulgaria in written form. That's on our website, www.guides.global. We also have masses of other information about Bulgaria and many other countries on that website. So do take a look at all of that. We also have lots of other videos about aspects of living, working and doing business in Bulgaria and other countries, so have a look at those. If you found this video useful, tell your friends, follow us and like us, and until we see you next time, thank you from Guides.Global for taking the time to watch us. Thank you and goodbye.